Alright, so here's a look inside the 94 LS400. It does have a permanent traction control light. There's a special procedure to pull OBD1 codes on Toyota and Lexus. I will show you that. It's pretty cool. Not a lot of people know how to do it, and obviously with this car being how old it is, a lot of people don't even want to mess with it because they don't care, and it's just too complicated for them. We're also going to try to figure out this mystery ECU problem, but primarily we're looking at that clunking in the rear end and the traction control light. So we will get these items removed, and then I'll show you the kind of trick procedure to get the OBD1 codes blinking, and then counting the blinks and all this neat stuff, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so we've done some diagnosing so far. The rear knuckle bushings are totally shot where the front trailing arm connects to. The pinion seal's leaking. There's a small oil pan leak up front, and someone cut the exhaust to transmission bracket. That's gone, and the power steering rack is leaking at the shaft, steering shaft, and on the passenger side inside the boot. Now we're trying to figure out this code 47. As you can hear, there's a clicking in the engine bay, and then it triggers the TRAC light. So let's go back to the engine bay quickly, and we'll see that this assembly is making some noise. I don't know if that's normal or not. I have the sensor disconnected because we're going to do some measurements. And then here's the actual FSM procedure. How to test, what to test, where to test, voltage, all that kind of stuff. So we've tried a different ECU. The problem persists. So it looks like somebody was in here at some point. I don't know if this is even OEM or not. You know, the screws aren't entirely lined up correctly. I don't even know if this thing was incorrect, if they just kind of stuck it on here and then screwed it in, because this is supposed to be, like, this sensor is supposed to be resting on these arms. So if you just stick it in there, it's not going to line up correctly. So I guess we'll start there and then kind of go from there and do our measurements to see. But that's really the only issue left. The ECU, again, it's not the reason why the code is lit up. It has something to do with something up here. So we will continue our fight here and see if we can narrow down what the problem is. Alright, so I think I solved the code 47. You can see we're blinking just steadily, which means there's no issues. You'll notice the TRAC light, though, is solid. Now, if it's solid in diagnostic mode, it says the control unit's bad, so the TRAC ECU might be bad. We'll have to just try a different one to see if that's the issue or not. But I'll show you here. If you remember before, when we turned the key to on, it would rapidly click. Now, we just get one click, and the issue was they installed the sub TPS incorrectly. They just basically stuck it on and screwed it in. Well, there's little, like I mentioned earlier, there's tabs on the motor that have to align with the tabs on the shaft. And you have to kind of turn the motor first and then seat it. But it looks like this was the issue, the code 47. Fingers crossed, still no code yet. And we'll have to order TRAC ECU to see if that gets it back into diagnostic mode, because right now it's basically dead. There's nothing coming from it at all. And here you can see you can ground this port or the one under the dash, same concept, but TE1 and E1 is going to get all of your modules into test mode, and that'll give you the transmission codes, the ABS codes if there are any, the traction control computer codes, engine codes. And you can leave this in when you're driving. It's not a big deal. It'll just be in kind of permanent diagnosis mode. So that's it for now. we're just going to have to wait a few days for that computer to come in, so we'll go from there. So we're just doing another test drive here on the 400. You can see we're still in diagnostics mode. Transmission and the ECU are flashing continuously. That means everything's still good. We have no codes, no pending codes. ABS and the TRAC are not lit up though, so yeah, I'm just still waiting on that other module so I can test and see if it's the module that's bad or what's going on, because it's not even showing up anymore. So everything else is good. Drives nice. ECU's rebuilt. We've got replaced a couple bulbs in here. These buttons, the heated seat button, track button, hazard button, those commonly fail. The lighting on them. Also, a new climate control, rebuilt climate control here. But that's it. I mean, it drives nice, but it's not a 430. It's not a 460. I mean, acceleration's good, but you can feel every bump. And I don't know if they replaced the struts with KYBs or aftermarket, but after driving air suspension cars for so long, you know, you can feel every bump throughout the car. There's no soft cushion or anything. It's nicer on smooth roads. I mean, there's nothing going on here, but you still get more wind noise because the side windows aren't dual pane. But I had one of these maybe 20 years ago or so, and I loved it. It's kind of what got me into Toyota and Lexus fully. So ordered a new, well, a used amplifier, so we're gonna wait on that, and then just that TRAC ECU, which is right there. Honestly, I don't even know if that's the problem, but I mean, we have no communication with the module at all, so it's a good start. And yeah, not much else to say. I mean, it's a solid car, and still holds its own for its age. This thing's 30 years old now, so I like it. Super basic but reliable. So the other problem with these is some of the other problems this car had with like a leaky steering rack, the rear suspension, that's all the bushings are toast. You know, everything back there is discontinued, so you're stuck with aftermarket knuckle bushings and aftermarket suspension rods and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little sticky when you get into that kind of thing because you don't have the OEM parts anymore available. So I don't know, it's just one of those things where they get phased out and you're stuck with aftermarket. But I'll show you what we were looking at in the back in just a second when I get parked, and some of the challenges that this customer might have with replacing them. Suspension, you know, it is what it is, kind of floaty compared to the 430 and 460. I can't imagine if you had one of these with air suspension, I can't even imagine. You'd have to just get rid of it because there's no, you can't buy those anymore. But yeah, I don't know. Suspension is kind of my only gripe with this car, just because it is so bouncy. Alright, let me show you guys what I'm talking about. So, yeah, as you can see, the problem is right here. It's this arm that goes forward, and then the bushing in this lower knuckle is just, it's gone. And they don't sell the bushing separate, it's just part of the knuckle, and of course the knuckle is not carried anymore by Lexus. So what do? know, what do you do? I like this blue. It's a pretty blue color. The other issue, there's some bearing noise. I don't know if it's the power steering pump or the alternator or the idler pulley, but that's got to get addressed at some point. The AC line is frosting up, so that's not normal either, but I'm not working on the AC. The guy took care of it. I mean, it's got new hood struts, it's got new suspension like I mentioned, new struts at least. He's got all new brake lines. He did a lot of work to it. New exhaust, new caps. But it's the little things that he needs to take care of that mechanics tend to overlook. And then we got the 460 here. This thing's running like a charm now. Needs a little cleaning, but you know, for the most part, this thing is good to go. Nothing else needed to touch on it. So I'm gonna get that thing back in the garage, and you know, like I said, I'm just waiting for a couple more things, and that thing will be done. All right, after many hours of diagnosing and troubleshooting, I think I figured this system out. So the traction control is up here. There's a valve back here that's controlled by the ECU that basically opens and closes the throttle for limiting air intake. So this is the traction control, closes the throttle, car doesn't go anywhere. So the customer was getting a code 47 on the TRAC system, and I also realized that in order to trigger the traction control, cruise control, ABS, and airbag systems, you have to ground TC and E1. So the engine, ECU, and trans is TE1 and E1, but TC and E1 is everything else. So what I did, I measured the voltage at the ECU, and it's basically saying that at idle this TPS is at 3 volts. Well, it's supposed to be under 0 or close to 0. So what I did, I took this off, and then the TPS snapped closed, and then it was back down to where it should be. So with the TPS removed, I cleared the codes, and then I got a new code of code 26, which comes back to the sub valve, which is this, is not moving. Basically, it's not opening even when the ECU is commanding it to do like a sweep or a full motion open to close type thing. So I think the problem lies here. They did replace both TPSs, but you know, the TPSs just read what is the valve is doing. So again, he replaced both. He still has the code, and then I verified that even with another ECU, we're still getting the same code. So the problem is either this or a TCS ABS ECU, but I've never seen those go bad. So we're gonna relay that information to the customer, see what they want to do, because I think this is the problem, and then this is causing the sub TPS code because this is not in the right position, if that makes sense. So I think we're good. We've done everything we can do on this thing, and I'll show you the codes here. And now you can see that we have all sorts of codes flashing because we are in the test mode. So airbag lights flashing constant, cruise, ABS. ABS and traction are the same ECU. So if one works, the other one works. And I thought incorrectly earlier that it might be bad because it was just solid, but I wasn't grounding the correct wire. So you'll see, is this code 26 or what's this next one here? So 1, 2, yep, here's our 26. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that's our valve. And then I reinstalled the TPS and we get 2, 3, 4. Now we're getting that TPS code 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Because that TPS is in the wrong position. So had we not removed the TPS first and then triggered that code 26, it never would have popped up, because we were just getting the code 47 initially. So that's where we're at with this. Testing. Yeah, I can talk about some testing here. So I pulled up the factory test procedure here and took a bunch of notes. Now the problem here, this is assuming that there is not a problem with the valve, the code 26, but we didn't know about the code 26. So if the valve was working correctly, this would apply, but some of these are going to be wrong because we're dealing with an underlying problem. But essentially, it just tells you, if you get a code 41 or 47, which are related, it tells you exactly what to do. So it's real important to get factory manuals or subscribe to TIS, which is a Toyota factory online database. And basically, step 2, so this is step 1 up here. Step 2 is essentially just checking the resistance of the TPSs themselves to make sure those are okay. So you're measuring values, you're measuring ground to voltage. So you have VTA1 and VTA2, which is each of the TPSs, to E2, which is a ground in the ECU. So right here it should say fully closed, that's your voltage, fully open, that's your voltage. So I did the test here. Here's our VTA1, which is the main TPS. Closed, we're at 0.2 volts, 0.52, which falls in between the range, and then open is 3.72. So we're good here. We have no codes for the main TPS. But here, VTA2, that's our sub TPS, and we're at 3.5 volts, closed and open. So this thing is, it's not the TBS's fault, because the TPS itself reads correctly when it's off of the throttle body. It reads 0 to 3 or whatever, 4 volts. So that's good. We know the TPS is reading correctly. It's just whatever it's attached to is the problem. So this is basically part 2. We don't need to worry about this until we fix the code 26. And this just tells you a little bit about how to diagnose. So if code 41 is displayed, check the throttle position circuit. If 47 is displayed, check the sub. This is just something else. This is just telling you that the ground might be open if you have 22, 24, and 41. So that's important. Check the voltage of the TPS. No good. You move to here, check the operation of the TPS. If that's okay, you check for the short and the harness. If that's okay, replace the ECM. Well, we've already tried that. We've rebuilt it, we've replaced it. It's still the same code. So that's basically, and again, this is relying on the fact that that valve, the traction control valve, works. So this isn't going to really apply here. And then lastly, this just shows a little bit about how the TPS and the sub TPS work together. So you've got the blue-red, which is pin 4 here and pin 4 here. That's voltage from 5 volts out of the ECU, so that powers the actual sensors. And then you have the ground, which is E2, brown. Sub just goes right into this one, taps in. And then you have your idle 1, idle 2, and then VTA2 and VTA1. So those are your voltages. So again, yeah, we're kind of stuck again, because we just need to find out what the customer wants to do. But at least we narrowed it down. Customer thought it was the ECU causing all these problems. It's not the ECU. So basically we're just going to relay him what we found and see where he wants to go. So it is difficult on these older cars, these older Lexus and Toyotas, to figure all this stuff out. Because like I said, it's not like you plug in a scanner and figure it out that way and it tells you what's wrong. You really got to do old school measurements and all that other stuff. So we'll see where this goes, and hopefully I'll have an update soon on where we're going. Alright guys, got it figured out. Super excited. Basically, I think last time I was talking about testing the traction control motor back here. So there's a procedure to test the pins 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5 for continuity. They all ohmed good, so the manual said replace the traction control computer. So I did, and it fixed the problem. Now on these, there's a traction control and ABS computer and a traction control ECU as well. So the problem was this one here, and these are the same with GS, SC, LS. It's all the same computer, but this was causing the code 47 for some reason. Now everything works. No check engine lights, no track lights, nothing. So this car is ready to go. What a crazy ride. The customer thought it was the ECU or the TPS first, so he replaced that, and he's like, well, there's nothing else left to replace, so it's got to be the engine control unit. A lot of times people don't know that there's sub-modules or, sub-ECUs, traction control ECU, all that kind of stuff. So that's where it really depends on you knowing how to diagnose stuff. Still waiting on this amp. Yeah, it is what it is. Also, some of the lighting, I think I mentioned this was out. I went ahead and replaced that for the customer. The TRAC one, and then that bulb down there. And interestingly enough, the traction control button works, but this cluster was replaced at some point in the past, and it's lacking the track off icon, which is supposed to be down here. But on this one, there's nothing there. So we're going to ask the customer to see if they want the correct cluster built with the faceplate that actually has the track off icon. But I verified traction control definitely works. And that's it. So measuring the VTA on the sub TPS. So in all conditions, normally with throttle closed and open, it's at 3.7 volts. So the throttle plate for the traction control is always open until you lose traction. Then you'll see the voltage drop down to 1 volt, half a volt, or whatever as that throttle plate closes. So that's how the system works, and we're done. So I'm pretty happy with this. The car is super nice. Other than the stuff I mentioned, the suspension's a little bit harder than 430, 460, because it's just regular struts. And all that other stuff I mentioned earlier about what needs to be fixed. The pinion seal's leaking. There's a bearing noise up front, alternator, something like that. And then those rear knuckles are the biggest problem because they don't make those anymore. So there's bushings under the... I showed that in a video earlier, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, when I laid down under the car. But yeah, those bushings are toast, so the wheel and everything, it's like almost like a bad wheel bearing. It moves so much. So, a lot to digest. Hopefully this helps some people with the TRAC system. The ECU does go bad. I've actually got a SC400 with a bad TRAC ECU too. So I'm hoping, I ordered a couple more, and hopefully I can get a couple more cars with the TRAC system working again. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Take care.